Hello, everybody. This is Nabil Sheikh with Omega Core Technologies. I know everybody's busy. We thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm very confident everybody will walk away with something worthwhile after this meeting. As everything we do at Omega Core, we approach everything in a holistic way. And I think cybersecurity should also be approached as a holistic way. We find that because of the different challenges that we have in cybersecurity, it's a team effort. The people side of it, HR can play a role. IT will play a very important role in terms of proactive protection, monitoring, as well as reaction. Legal has its own role it will play as well. And then at the end, despite everything we do, we are going to need our cybersecurity insurance to be able to protect us should, despite our efforts, something comes through. So today our focus is going to be on the cybersecurity insurance aspect of it to make sure everybody is informed and make a very informed decision, because there is a lot to consider and there is a lot of misconceptions that exist. With that, I want to really thank Doug for joining us from CPAD. We do use their services for Omega Core Technologies and few of our clients, and I thought this would be appropriate to bring him as a subject matter expert to share his knowledge and expertise to educate us all. Doug, I will pass the baton to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nabil. Really appreciate it. Appreciate everyone joining today. And I'm going to be walking through cyber insurance, what it is, what the current trends are with regards to cyber insurance, what we're seeing today, and what you need in order to have in place from a technical standpoint in order to make sure that you're maximizing your ability to get good terms from your cyber insurance and that your cyber carrier will actually pay out claims if an incident occurs. And then I'll also talk a little bit about where the future is with regards to cyber insurance from our perspective right now. We, as Nabil mentioned, we have a great partnership with OmegaCore, and our organization, Seedpod Cyber, likes to partner with cybersecurity experts who are really paying attention to making sure the right controls are put in place with their clients. And by doing so, we from the insurance side are able to put together good, solid programs at competitive pricing here. But I'll just start from the beginning here and just talk about what is cyber insurance. Many of you may not have it at this point. Some of you may have it and still not understand exactly what it includes. It includes two primary components. The first component is what's called the liability component. So if you happen to get hacked and your data is taken, and it's data obviously that includes client data. Let's say that you're a healthcare doctor's office, as an example, that includes patient data. Well, that patient data is very valuable. It could compromise your clients, your patients in this situation, and they may want to turn around and feel that because they've been damaged, they're going to sue you. And so the coverage provides you protection in the event that you're sued as a result of some type of cyber incident. It could come from individuals, it could come from other companies who feel that you weren't paying attention to their data. It could even come from regulatory agencies, the Federal Trade Commission, as an example, or the state state of Maryland, if depending upon whether you breached laws in those areas here. So that's one component. The other component is, and this is actually where we'll talk a little bit more about claims in a moment, but where a lot of claims are being paid out are the costs that you bear during and after an incident. When you go into your office or in the morning and try to log in and you get a message saying, we've taken over your computer, your data has been encrypted. If you want to get it again, please reach out to us through this email. When you get a notice like that, as an example, a lot of things start happening. Most of them involve dollars. You have to have an attorney get involved. You have to have forensics get in place. You have to perhaps negotiate with the bad guys to get your data back. And you'll have to come up with Bitcoin in order to pay it. You then have to, once all that is said and done, you have to get someone to help you get your systems back up and running. And during the time you're down, you're losing money because you can't service your clients. All these are what are called first party costs that you bear during an incident. And that's where cyber insurance really comes into play, in which they will cover those forensics costs. They will cover the attorneys who have to be involved. They will cover for a Megacore, as an example, to come in and help you get your systems back up and running. They will cover for the lost profits that you may have while you are down here. And then for another, they'll also cover if your reputation is damaged, if as a result of this you lose clients and that your income level can't get back to the way that it was, there'll be coverage there. The other area where it will cover is in the area of what broadly is called social engineering or business email compromise. That's when the bad guy perhaps gets into your system, sends an email out to all your clients and it says, we've just changed our banking. Please wire your future payments to this bank routing number and account number. And unfortunately, your business starts going away. Or you receive an email from someone who you think is your boss saying, I need 25,000 wired right away so I can close this deal. You go ahead and wire it, and unfortunately, it wasn't your boss. So those type of e-fraud, as we call it, electronic fraud coverages there's also coverage available for that as well. So when you think about the cyber insurance, it comes into the two components. It protects you for any damage that you cause to others, which results in them suing you perhaps. And it also covers you to get you back up and running as close to the way that you were before the incident, as well as to recover profits or income or cover the cost of extra expenses while you're down. In this day and age where we are all heavily reliant upon our systems to keep our businesses going, it is a crucial area that we should be thinking about from a security standpoint, and that's where Nabil and Core comes in, as well as from the insurance perspective here. Now, I want to talk to you just a little bit about where the market is today. And there's some misconceptions. I think Nabil talked about that here. The good news for you is as they would say, it's a buyer's market. Cyber insurance is relatively inexpensive these days compared to where it was a couple of years ago. But that doesn't mean that the risks have gone away. In fact, the risks are continuing to be there. And what's probably even more concerning is that not many of the small and medium-sized businesses have cyber insurance today. There's only about a 10% market share. So many of you that may be listening to this, if you have cyber insurance, that you've taken a good step in terms of managing this digital risk. For those of you who haven't, it may be something to consider here. And the one reason, if nothing else, is because most of the claims are occurring to small and medium-sized businesses. 98% of all claims that come from businesses under $100 million in revenue here. And that's 49% of all the dollars, the claim that are paid out. So when you factor in, you read the newspaper, you hear about these big companies suffering cyber attacks, only half of what gets paid out are going to them. The other half is sitting with businesses just like yours. So it's important to really take this seriously. And really over the past few years, incident costs have increased 30%. And these are the costs that I referred to of having to get yourself back up and running at the end of the incident. Those costs keep going up, and it becomes more and more difficult for you to have the cash to be able to address these. And that's why the insurance is an important consideration here. I want to talk a little bit about what the risk drivers are. And hopefully you've been paying somewhat attention to some of these areas. Ransomware that's where someone, as I referenced in the example, comes into your environment, they encrypt your data, they need for you to unlock the data, they need to give you a key. and they're going to do that for money, typically in some type of medium like Bitcoin. And now what they're doing in addition, or even instead of, is they will go in, they will take some data, and then they'll encrypt it. So if you say, I'm not going to pay you the ransom because I can just back up, restore my backups, and let's say that you can do that, which is great, they'll say, I have data, so if you don't pay me, I'm going to call all your clients, and some of them have actually done this, and say that, and threaten them that I'm going to expose their data if you don't pay. And that is becoming more and more of the norm. So that's one major area. The other area, I would say large area, really encompasses that e-fraud that I mentioned. The business email compromise, where people get in your systems, they actually pretend that you're you and start sending fraudulent emails out. The wire fraud type situations. There was a mortgage company which received a notice to make a wire payment, and they thought it was coming from the title company. They sent out, I think this was a large transaction, they wired $49 million to the wrong entity, fraudulent entity. And so those type of situations, that whole kind of area of e-fraud, business email compromise, there's $1 billion a year loss to businesses around the country here. So it's a major issue. And when you look at the small businesses, what is the impact here? For a ransomware attack, the average cost of that attack is about $630,000. And that's despite that only now 15 to 20% are choosing to pay, which is a good thing. Most businesses are digging in their heels. Hopefully they're working with great organizations like Core to make sure they've got backup so they can get back up and running here. But still those costs are in the six-figure range. Wire transfer fraud. I gave one example at the high end. The average for a small business is $170,000 going out the door. And the biggest cost, what most businesses don't think about that I mentioned, is those lost profits and the extra expenses while you are down. If you're down for a month, that can put a real drain on your margins, on your profitability, your ability to serve your clients and retain and certainly write new business here. And the average cost of just the lost profits and extra expense is $1.2 million. And when you throw in the cost to do the forensics, get your systems back up and running, that's approaching $2 million there. And when we talk with businesses, we run through these numbers, we ask them, is $2 million something that you want to keep on the balance sheet to be ready if you have to use it, if you have an incident? And obviously not too many really want to keep something like that on the balance sheet, assuming that they have the resources to do. And that's where the insurance can come into play, because at a much lower cost, you can cover your balance sheet there. Just driving into some of the businesses that you may be running, nonprofits. We do a lot of work with nonprofits from a cyber insurance standpoint. Fortunately, the average cost is relatively low, $108,000 on average for an incident, but it can go up to, for small businesses, up to $3 million. And this is based on claims data over the past couple years here. The types of loss I referenced: business email compromise, ransomware. And when Core is thinking about the types of security and protocols that they're putting in place, they're referencing how do we protect against these types of risks here. And that largely informs the types of solutions that are recommended. This is construction. We talk to a lot of construction businesses. A lot of them think that they're not subject. Nobody's going to bother reaching out to trying to hack a construction firm. And to be quite honest, the bad guys aren't really paying attention to the type of businesses you are. Largely, they're just casting a wide net and they're trying to figure out who are the most vulnerable. It's almost as if they're driving down the street and just checking to see, are there any lights off? Is anybody not there? And then trying the door handle to see or the windows to see if they can get in. And there's a lot of claims within the construction area. The average is around 118,000 up to $2 million. Business email compromise and ransomware, again, the major types of loss here. With manufacturing, The average is about $400,000. It's larger because a lot of claims really impact firms' ability to produce, right? So that does impact their ability to deliver the income components, and also it costs a lot more to get them back up and running to get their, especially if their machines are connected to the systems. And in addition to ransomware and business email compromise, it's that wire transfer fraud, because a lot of these businesses, they're wiring money to, or they're receiving money from their clients here. Talking about the security controls that move the needle, the insurance industry this past year did a survey of the carriers, and just in looking at from a claim perspective, what are the controls that really drive or could be put in place that weren't put in place at time and claim, and that have a major impact on the cost. And the first one is something that may be surprising: incident response planning. And the OmegaCore folks can go into more detail on what that involves, but basically, when you get hacked, you want to have a plan. You want to develop that plan ahead of time of what to do. You want to know who to contact, when to contact, what not to do, as well as what to do. And you want to practice it every once in a while. Think of it as a fire drill for your systems. And those organizations that have a good plan, that are able to access it when an incident occurs, that have practiced the plan, they fare better by a large margin than those that don't. And this is an area that isn't paid, most businesses don't pay a lot of attention to, and it's an area in which they should. The other, and you'll see a lot of acronyms here, you don't necessarily need to know them per se, just make sure that you're talking to OmegaCore about them, and they'll, I'm sure, be bringing it up to you. But EDR is endpoint detection and response. That's basically something in your system that's checking for something that's coming into the environment that isn't usual. It's unusual, and therefore it could be bad. And so it starts protecting the rest of the environment from that. And so that is something that you really should have in place. Multi-factor authentication, MFA, that's when you have to log in and you have to use something on your phone or biometrics with your finger or other device. That is critical. And if you're not using that, it makes it very easy for the bad guys to go in because all they have to do is crack your password. And unfortunately, it's not that hard to crack a password. And if there's no other way to protecting that login, they can get in and start doing damage. User awareness training. 86% of all attacks involve a user making a mistake. They're accidentally clicking on a link. They're accidentally providing their credentials. And so having a good, solid training program in place is really critical. The also patching, and I'll just again use the phone example. When the little red dot starts appearing on your gear icon, saying that usually means that something has to be updated, that's helping to protect your phone in that situation. And the same thing happens with your systems. You want to make sure that they're kept up to date, because those patches often are covering or addressing security flaws that the bad guys are starting to figure out. And if you don't patch them, then you could become a victim very easily there. The other area is really, for many of us, since we're all connected, sometimes we could be really locked down, but the vendors that we use may not be. And so in those situations, you really should be thinking about, and this is again where an organization like OmegaCore can help, really understanding what are my vulnerabilities of the systems that I depend upon, and how do I make sure that I can be protected if they go down. And that we're starting to see that more and more. Last year, there were a couple of examples. You may have heard of Change Healthcare, which was a big prescription drug ordering and logistic firm. They had a ransomware attack, and that really messed up the supply chain for healthcare. And a lot of organizations were impacted by that. There was another example of CrowdStrike, a security company last year, was impacted. And we only have to think to last week where we had AWS and people couldn't get their Starbucks latte in the morning, and their kids couldn't get their McDonald's. And fortunately, that was only down a few hours. The estimates are that was a $60 million hit to businesses here. So we're all heavily dependent. We have to start thinking about our connections and how do they impact us, and what options do we have if they go down. One thing, and I mentioned, and Nabil and I were talking about, is you go out and you buy cyber insurance, but do you really know what you have? And there's always that fear when I talk to a lot of businesses, so I know it's there, the fear that, or the thinking that, well, these carriers, they're just looking for ways to deny a claim. And even if you have the cyber insurance, you're wondering, will it actually pay out? And we've developed a tool, and then we work with OmegaCore in terms of providing this, called the insurability audit. And you don't have to use our tool necessarily, but it does do a couple things. One is it evaluates the coverage that you have against two criteria. One is adequacy. Do I have enough coverage in place? Are the terms correct? Are my sublimits or endorsements, are they the right ones for my type of organization and my size of business? And the other thing that it looks at is, do I have the right controls in place? Do I have the right security? Did I listen to OmegaCore and do what they say? Or are there some gaps because I thought from a budget standpoint I was going to hold off, or I didn't think it was going to happen to me? And what we do is we evaluate, do you have enough coverage? And do you have the right controls so that if that carrier that you have comes in when you have a claim, that they're going to honor and they're going to pay out that claim, that you won't have an issue due to systems deficiency. And unfortunately, the stats are 44% of the time, businesses don't get the full value of their coverage because of deficiencies in the tech stack at time of claim. So this report goes over it. Here, this happens to be a psychologist's office, $2.5 million. They have 250,000 in insurance. It talks about the industry threats directed to them. It frames it from a cost basis. So that's the universal language of business, right? So that I can understand, what is my cost of risk to me? And then it also outlines what I should have from a technical standpoint, what I should have from an insurance standpoint, and contrasts it to what I actually have in place and what's missing. What's missing from a control standpoint, and are there gaps in the insurance coverage? Highlights how I should approach it, and talks through what are the business value enhancements? What does this mean if I go through these to my reputation? What does it mean to my operating efficiencies? What does it mean to being regulatory compliant? We often think of cybersecurity as in the context of risk, which is the context, obviously, it is part of, but it's also creating business value to you as well here. And I'll even talk more about that in a moment. The other component that I wanted to talk about was, what are we seeing in the future with regards to cyber insurance and cybersecurity? And there's two primary areas. Everyone's talking about AI in almost every context. So you can't do a webinar without mentioning AI. And certainly it's having a dramatic impact on cybersecurity here. In fact, I was just reading this week a stat that 89% of all ransomware attacks today are now AI generated. So that it's phenomenal. And for those of you who are paying attention to those phishing emails, hopefully most of you are, the vast majority of them are being crafted by AI. We're all using maybe not all, but most of us are using AI for marketing purposes now, while the bad guys are using it to figure out how to get to you there. And it's becoming more and more sophisticated as the AI tools get better and the bad guys get better at using them, making it very difficult. And some of you may even have heard of things called deep fakes. Deep fakes are AI videos or AI audio in which it becomes very difficult to tell the person apart, whether you're talking to them on the phone or on screen. There was even an example of a Zoom meeting where two AI generated people looking like the CEO and the CFO were instructing other people who were live on a video call to wire money right away. And it's just incredible now, where we need to start thinking about from a security standpoint, how do we line up against that? And that's where Megacore, again, can come in and help with regards to those. What are the controls? What are the mechanisms? And from an insurance perspective, most of those types of attacks today are covered, but you have to make sure. You've got to make sure that you're reading your policy, because there are some that do have some exclusions that in which they may not be covered. The other area that is really becoming more and more prevalent is privacy related issues. There are more and more states are coming up with their own privacy regulations. Europe came out a few years ago with its standard. California came out subsequently, and now more and more states are lining up from a privacy perspective. And that's creating a field day for the plaintiff attorneys, because the plaintiff attorneys are using those statutes, which often include penalties on a per violation basis, $1,000 per violation. And they're finding companies who, and they're small companies that may be reaching out to 500, 1,000 individuals that they're calling privacy violations, and that adds up to a lot of money. So those are issues that are really coming to play, and that businesses really aren't as focused on today. And that's where, again, leaning on an organization like a Megacore to really help you identify what is the critical data that we have. How are we thinking about storing it? Do we keep it on? Do we make it available throughout our network? Do we need to have data going back to 1860, or can we just keep a few years of data accessible? And who has access to it, and what controls need to be in place? All these become critical. And then tying into from the system side, given that these are regulatory issues, you need to talk to the right attorneys who are specialists in privacy, who are specialists in these types of laws, to help you craft the right contractual privacy laws. Those annoying cookie messages that come up, they're there for a reason. They're there to protect you as a consumer, but also to protect the organization as well. And you need to have good legal counsel to review that here. And also to make sure that your coverage covers privacy, because sometimes there'll be exclusions for what they call wrongful collection here. So those are some things to really be thinking about as we look ahead to the evolution of technology, as we look to how the regulatory environment is changing, and also how those threats are really increasing at an amazing velocity driven by AI. The good news is, hopefully from a business standpoint, all you have to do is understand that those risks are there, and then you look to an organization like a Megacore to come in and help you with the security side of it. You look to insurance to make sure that you're working with specialists. You don't have to work with SeedPod, but make sure that you're working with a cyber insurance specialist who understands that, because the general insurance broker population may not really understand the nuances within cyber insurance. So it's always good to get, just like you want to talk to an attorney specialist in privacy, talk to an insurance broker who specializes in cyber. And with that, you're addressing your risk needs from a system standpoint. You're addressing your risk needs from a legal standpoint. You want to take a look, as Nabil mentioned, look at it from a human resources perspective as well. And then the insurance is there to protect your balance sheet and also provide the right expertise when an incident occurs to help you navigate that. And it will all be at a much lower cost overall than the cost that could be potentially facing you when something bad occurs. So with that, I'm going to pause here, and I don't know if there's been any questions, or if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them on that. What's the mechanism?
It's the Q&A, Doug.
In the Q&A.
Yeah.
There.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing and bringing so much awareness and insights as to how important having the proper security controls in place, and also mitigating the risk by having a valid cyber insurance partner as well. Alex, do you see any questions in the Q&A that we can address at this time? We have a few minutes remaining in the call.
No questions, but I did get a question earlier this week that someone who couldn't join wanted to ask. And I think you touched on this, Doug. You mentioned some of the controls. Is there any controls that have more of like the biggest impact on the premium cost? Anything that people can get started with right away?
Yeah, thank you. And I do get asked that quite a bit. There are three main things that you need to have in order to get insurance. One is you need to have that multi-factor authentication in place. You also need to have the endpoint detection and response solution in place. So an ability to not just say, hey, there's a piece of malware on the system, but the ability to actually react to it and help contain that. And the third that you really need is backup protections here. Those are the three critical things. The fourth is because you'll be denied to get coverage, and certainly it will be an issue at claim time, is to make sure that you're keeping your systems patched and up to date. There's Windows 11 is now, for those of you on Windows machines, they've come out with Windows 11. I guess it's been out for some time, but Windows 10 is going away. They're no longer going to be supporting Windows 10. And what that means is if the bad guys find a vulnerability in Windows 10, Microsoft isn't going to patch it. They're not going to provide patching for it. So you really should be working with Megacore to help if I'm sure they've already talked to you about it, but to get those systems upgraded there. Those are the main things. And then certainly, and a lot of organizations don't have this, which I don't understand, but security awareness training is really a critical one. We talked about that the bad guys, they're targeting, for the most part, they're targeting us. They're targeting and just using kind of psychological games to get us to do things here. The training really helps there. There's a whole number of things, but those are the critical things, Alex, to pay attention to.
Thank you for that. I also got a question just overall from a technical standpoint, some of the controls just from a security perspective that are recommended. I thought it'd be a good time to just run down a list. People can view the recording afterwards or reach out to us to get a full list. But you've touched on a lot of them: implementing MFA, security awareness training. Those are usually some of the top ones right away. Email filtering, phishing and spam, email filtering for phishing and spam, strong password policies, cleaning up old accounts, improving email settings in general through DNS. And this is when you talk to your IT provider or Omega Core, updating SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And a lot of those are actually the ones I just mentioned are the quick wins that can be implemented. It doesn't take a ton of effort to get going. Some of the other core controls that take a little bit more effort are having like a centralized patch management policy and process. Of course, backing up your data, especially if it's not sufficient currently, implementing a new backup solution that is sending your data offline and not just a local backup. You talked about EDR earlier, and you went through a little bit of what that means. And then any remote access, being fully secure, encrypting tunnels, MFA for end users for any type of remote access. And it touches on some of the other items that, have been talked about a ton, hopefully with your IT, but remote access with RDP, remote desktop protocol, needs to be blocked. It should not be available to the internet. And that's where the VPNs come in, and blocking SMB ports. Last two, just real quick, implementing consistent encryption for endpoints and data in transit. So that's like emails, web, and things like that, which take a little bit more effort with your IT team to get involved, as well as access control. So role-based and least privilege are common terms that we can talk a little bit more about at another time.
And for those of you that are listening to this, I'm listening to it and I'm just thinking, this has become very much a specialized area. And so cybersecurity, the bad guys are figuring it out all the time. And as well, so you really need to have good personnel who keep up to date on it. And sometimes it's very difficult if you're an IT person within an office trying to respond to a million different things to try to keep up on just what's the latest security. That's where, Alex, you and your team from OmegaCore really come in, because you are specializing in it.
Thank you, Doug. I really appreciate it. I know we're at the top of the time, so I first and foremost want to thank Doug and Nabil and Alex for joining and participating and providing this I feel, very valuable information and things to think about and in your planning. We will post this, so you will have access to it to go back and review again and again. But for now, thank you for joining and have a great rest of the day.
All right. Thank you.